Hi, I'm Brian Richardson with PrepToExit.com, and so in this video, I'm going to give you the big picture view of the first phase of selling your company, and that phase is the consideration phase. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to hit kind of on the big picture of what it takes to sell your company. And the first question is always, should I? And this is not even discussed among the business brokerage realm. Business brokers don't want you to even slow down right here. They just want you to say yes to selling your company. But there's other options about selling your company. And understanding the big why you would want to sell your company is something that's really important. And so there's three different ways to be able to get out of your company, right? Is you can either sell it, you can either keep it, or you can actually close it, right? So those are all options of being able to exit from your company. And so going through the process and purposely evaluating the pros and the cons of each of those three options is going to be critically important in the phase one. It took me a number of years when I was thinking about selling my first company to even be able to understand all of the dynamics of weighing the pros and cons of selling my company versus closing my company versus keeping it. Now, it's easy as owners to be able to know whether we should keep it because we know exactly how much net profit we're making. We know exactly the track record of income to ourselves. So we have that piece of the puzzle, no problem. But what if we close our company? That's always a question of, okay, well, how would I close it? What would I get from that? Sure, I'm going to be able to have lots of time to do something else, but what value would I get out of closing my company? Especially if you have a company that has a lot of physical assets that you'd be able to sell off, inventory, vehicles, intellectual property, etc. There's a value to those things that you can definitely have an income from if you simply close your company. But the other question is, should I sell my company? Now, there's a lot of dynamics in selling your company. This video series is just going to be a summary overview. My other video series where I go into a deep dive detail within each of the 5 phases, I go into all of the tools and instruments that you need to be able to calculate whether you should sell your company. Selling your company is very complex. Valuations, EBITDA, multiples, industry standards, best management practices, due diligence, all of those things weigh into the equation of whether you should sell your company. Once you go through that, then you have a total dollar amount that you can even consider, right? So if you're going to sell it, you have to be able to know what the pros and the cons are. And you don't even know what those are until you're able to accurately list off all of the aspects of it and all of the cons of it. And so this video series is just letting you know there's a lot of information going into that checklist of the pros and the cons. And in my detailed video series, I go into actually what those are, okay? All right, so let's now move on to some of the factors that are involved. Let's talk about some of the factors about selling your business. And most people don't even think about these, and so I'm bringing them out here. There's the personal factors about selling, right? So I don't know what your trigger is of what's getting you to even think about selling your company, but when we sell our companies, there's a lot of personal impact. Who we are, our self-identity, who our spouse sees us as, our life partner sees us as, who we are in the community, all of that changes. And so there's a lot of self-identity dynamics and ego dynamics that come into play when selling our companies. We have to consider that. And I've consulted with lots of owners about their exits in their companies, and having a personal perspective of no longer being, quote, the owner of such and such a company, it definitely is a real impact, and it's definitely something psychologically that we have to process. So just know that that's going to be something to consider of who am I once I sell my company, right? So then another factor is the passion. Do you even have the passion to stay in your organization and to be able to keep running it? Or are you zeroed out on your passion and you want to be doing something else? And being able to bravely recognize that, wow, I am really done with this company, or I'm really done with this industry, or my spouse is, or my family is, etc. That's perfectly fine to recognize that, okay? So go through that process and identify that. The other aspect the other factor, that really puts a big question mark that you've got to be able to understand is, what's the business environment like? Now, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and I'm just going to touch on these really quickly. But the business environment is not just how your industry is doing, how the economy is doing, how your local geographic region is doing. For example, Kansas City didn't have the dot-com boom, but San Francisco did. Well, guess what happened to the limousine industry in San Francisco? It became very inexpensive to be able to get a limo because there were so many people that had so much money that were in such a hurry that the limousine industry basically really flattened out and had a lot less profit margin. Much less Uber came in and started competing for the rides also, Uber X, etc. Where Kansas City, limousine services didn't have a lot of change, right? So geographic factors in the business environment are something to pay attention to. Rising costs. If you're in the oil industry and gas prices went up, it's going to affect you just like it does in the shipping industry. So those are the three factors to really pay attention to as you're even considering and selling your business. And it takes a lot of personal reflection to go through all of those, okay? All right, so now let's talk about the next factor, and that is the timing factor. When is it best to sell your company? And you're going to hear all sorts of comments about when the best time is. And, they always say when you don't need to, right? But in reality, we all live lives. And so if you can choose the timing of selling your company, great. It's worthwhile. But if you've got factors in life that are driving you into that choice, then it just is what it is, and you've got to make the best of it, right? So, and it's very common with the baby boomer business owners that a partner or spouse is wanting them to be selling the company and relocate closer to grandkids. It's very, very common, right? So that is a dynamic that's going to come into play, is the timing of that, is how soon or later do you want it. Another timing dynamic is getting a bad diagnosis. I helped one company where the husband suddenly had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 3 months to live. He's got a machine shop with 25 people that he's employed, a wife that's only been doing the books, has no idea how to run the company. So we had to be able to get in there, and I worked with her to understand what she needed to do to either keep it or sell it or close it, right? So that sometimes the timing just is not something that you have control over. Okay, now let's talk about the methods, okay? Now, there's going to be 3 different methods. Method number 1, number 2, and number 3. And that is somebody that you already know. You can sell it to them. Somebody that you go find on your own, that you can be able to deal with it, and that's you looking for it. Or you're going to have to go find a stranger and use a broker to be able to get it sold, or an investment banker, right? So the first 2 options here are something that you can control. A lot of times when I've talked to owners about selling their companies, they've already got somebody identified, either a family member, one of their sons or daughters, or even somebody that's been in the business a while, the general manager, production manager, lead engineer, etc., that they want to sell to. Perfectly fine, very legitimate. Just know ahead of time, if you're going to sell to somebody that you already know, treat it like a business transaction. There's so much money involved. The impact on everyone's life is so tremendous. And the complexity of all of the paperwork and the legal dynamics and the financial flow is so complex, it's well worth treating it as a transaction and not just as something as if, I'm going to sign the title to my boat over to Bob. So it's high impact, high complexity. Treat it as the transaction that it really is. Don't assume that it's going to be simple just because you know them and you trust them and you like them and that you believe in them, okay? Take my words, lots of deals have crashed, lots of friendships have been broken up, and lots of employees have left mad because deals didn't work out because the owner didn't take it seriously from the outset. And I personally have consulted and done turnarounds trying to recover those situations. Okay. All right, so that's all I have to cover in this video. That's kind of the big picture view of what's involved in the first phase, the consideration phase, is make sure that you even understand the first 3 aspects of should I, and which 3 directions you're going to be going in, either selling it, keeping it, or closing it. Make sure that you're going to have to figure out what all the pros and cons are in selling your company to be able to even know whether that's the option that you're going to want to do. And then also recognize that there's personal factors. These factors are going to be things that it's going to take time to emotionally process these and intellectually process these aspects. If they're taken care of up front, then down the road, when a deal is in process and a pothole happens, it's really hard to deal with these issues down the road when the pressure of a transaction is on top of you. It's hard enough for us to deal with ourselves. Okay? And then also recognize that there's a timing dynamic. And the best that you can to be able to control that dynamic, the better off you're going to be. So I'm Brian Richardson, serial entrepreneur, founder of PrepToExit.com. Thanks for joining me on this video. Go ahead and just finish this one out, and then we'll go right into the next video with the second phase.